Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. I have a special review for you guys from the brand Seagull watches. They are a Chinese heritage brand dating all the way back to 1955. And yes, there are some differences between Seagull watches and their parent company, Sea-Gull. That can definitely be a bit confusing, but I'll specifically be referencing their official Seagull watch store and their products within this review. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this is an everyday watch. Some key characteristics in design, which you're looking for something you can wear every day. Of course, it's really just going to be mostly that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes, with this one skewing more onto the sporty side, but I wouldn't know if I would call it directly a sports watch. One, because it has quite a few complications, and two, it's not super water resistant at 50 meters or 5 bar of water resistance, but I would hesitate. It's in that range, but for me, I wouldn't say it's like a dedicated sports watch. It's definitely more of an everyday piece that's meant for versatility that just happens to be at a fuller size. This is known as their Panda Eye, and this is in the steel bezel configuration with the steel bracelet, and essentially a multi-function sport watch with a Breitling-esque aesthetic. These go for $201, yes, and this was kindly sent in terms of the sample for review, and they even sent over a code of AVG10 so that you guys can get 10% off of anything within their entire store. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so while clearly a handsome piece, and actually really well constructed, especially considering the fact that Seagull is a manufacturer, and I mean, these movements are made by Seagull, put into a Seagull watch. It's all very impressive. The styling itself, I don't know how well it resonates with me. I do like, of course, the look of it. It definitely has almost a chronograph vibe with that tachymeter scale, which you can still measure with that running seconds hand. And then the two subdials would be the day and the date versus, typically your subdial would, be maybe a sub running seconds and then, either a 30-minute or, 12-hour counter or something like that. But at face value, it's a Panda. It looks great. It even has this really cool ring here. Check this out. A little sliding chapter ring, which actually is a 12-hour counter. So you could use this for GMT purposes and set the offsets now as you're traveling, which I think is really cool. Or let's say you're calculating a different time zone or something like that. It definitely is helpful. Obviously not as helpful as a 24-hour scale when you're thinking about night versus day. But if you're traveling, let's say you're going to go somewhere, I'm in California and I need to go to Texas. Guys, it's just that easy. Boom. And I didn't have to hack the seconds hand or anything like that. Oh, New York. Boom. Back to Cali. Okay. There it was. And there's even actual clicks to it. I'm not sure if the camera's gonna be able to pick that up. Yeah. It's nice to have that little click so that you can kind of rest it within that. But I don't know. I think that's actually a pretty cool feature. And again, you still do have that tachymeter bezel there on the outside. So if you did want to use that for calculating, different types of speeds and whatnot, that's available to you. Now, the overall look here is definitely, again, it's pretty sporty, very Breitling-esque, but let's look at the dimensions. 43 millimeters in diameter, not a small watch. I wouldn't say oversized, especially for, considering how much information there is on the dial, on the bezel and everything that. It actually feels pretty well balanced at 43 millimeters, and if they were able to make it smaller, it'd be cool too. Of course, I would probably want to skew for smaller. Maybe something like this be better at 40, maybe even 39. If you don't squish it all together too much, I think this would look really clean. Or, maybe when you remove a couple elements and just make it a little bit more plain, or, try to maybe move slightly away from the, this aesthetic that definitely makes you think at a glance that this could be a chronograph, and simplify things. I think that could be good too. Now, the thickness, including the crystal height, is going to be 13.4. So this is a chunky boy, but at 43 millimeters, 13.4 is actually not too bad. The lug to lug is 51.1, which isn't great, for smaller wrists, but I think with the, when it comes to the actual curvature here, you can see actually a little, inset integrated pusher there, which is great, which is actually what changes the day of the week function. Now, I think this all fits and kind of flows, right? Of course, in terms of scale, it could be too big for your wrist. That's fine. At least you're going to get to learn a little bit more about the Seagull brand and in terms of the genuine Seagull products that are coming out and the level of fit and finish, which I have to say in this case is quite impressive. You're going to get 316 L stainless steel, brushed and polished, flat sapphire. And then when we get to that bezel, although it does have kind of serrations for a grip, it's not a turning bezel. So it's going to be essentially just a fixed bezel, which makes sense for a tachymeter bezel. And then, of course, you have that 12-hour inner rotating bezel that's controlled by this crown. Then you have a push-pull crown with a signed crown there at the traditional 3 o'clock position. And then down at the 4 o'clock, you actually have a pusher here. So this isn't, you don't spin this, you push it. So it's how it says it's 29th, right? Boom, 30th, 31st. And we can just go all the way around while we're here. So we just get back to the 29th. Boom. So pretty cool there. And then, of course, at the 8 o'clock, there's that integrated pusher to do the day of the week side. So, you would just need a little spring bar tool and you pop that. And essentially, once you set it, you're good. So as long as the watch is running, that day of the week is just going to keep flipping with the day of the month and you'll be good to go. Now, the movement inside, which is actually pretty impressive, and we do get a nice clear look at it through this display case pack. Look at that. Even the movement has a bit of a chronograph vibe to it. Look at that. Nicely decorated. A lot of perlage there. Let me try to get things out of the way, get a couple other angles of it. That's a good looking piece. Let me give it a quick little wipe here because, of course, there's going to be some smudging, some fingerprints or anything like that. And at this price point at around $200, I don't think you can expect that there's going to be anti-smudge treatments. I mean, even some of the more expensive watches don't even do that, but sometimes you get lucky. I think this looks really good. Check it out. It's going, it's pumping. In terms of the details, 48-hour power reserve with a 3 hertz sweep. So 21,600 vibrations per hour on that beat rate. So it's essentially when you're looking at this here, when you're looking at that sweeping seconds hand, it's going to be ticking, pretty similar to what you would find in either a Seiko or one of the newer Swatch Group watches with a Powermatic 80 movement, where you're going to have only a 3 hertz sweep versus a typical 4. So beating at about 6 pulses there, 6 little ticks in between each second versus 8 little ticks between each second. So I'd still think smooth enough, and especially again at the price point at a $201, I think that's pretty outstanding, especially considering again the level of in-houseness that's here. You do even get that display case back, which is nice. And we get into the dial, you're getting this really cool, of course, Panda style dial there. It's stepped. There are various levels and elements to the subdials, various finishing. You're getting radial finishing as well as a nice kind of clean, satiny, matte surface there. And then you have loomed hands. You also have that nice red tipped seconds hand, as well as a little red tip there for the date pointer, which is nice as well. You're getting 5 bar or 50 meters of water resistance, which, typically you're not going to even dive past 40 meters of water resistance, and really need to put it to the test on that for a recreational dive. So 50 should be good as long as everything is, of course, engaged. So your seals are going to be engaged when your crown is pushed in, and then these, this pusher and this crown, as long as or this crown and this pusher, I should say, as long as you're not pushing them in under the water, you should be good to go, in any type of situation, realistically, apart from dedicated, hardcore scuba diving. But again, these seals are only going to work while everything is, pushed in and the seals are engaged, and again not actively working through the seals by trying to use any of the external features there through those additional crowns and pushers. Now the The bracelet here, guys, 22 millimeter lug. So that is another thing that kind of helps this visually not seem oversized because it's quite proportional. 43 millimeter watch, 22 millimeter lug. It has a nice wide flank to it, which is going to give you a nice amount of wrist presence. And then it actually has a really nice taper that actually tapers down to 18 millimeters. So that is really nice. That's the kind of equivalent ratio there at a 4 millimeter taper, which you would get, let's say, from a 20 millimeter that tapers down to 16. So very nice from that perspective. You're getting this fully articulated 5-link setup, solid links, end links, split pin construction. So that's not the greatest, but the nice thing is it's super easy for you to set. All you need is one of those cheap pusher tools, so you're good to go there. I mean, I size all of my own bracelets, and I do some of the real difficult multi-sleeve, pin and collar stuff, and I'm comfortable with it. And this is just super easy from that perspective when it's just a little friction split pin. And honestly, it's it's equally as sturdy or anything like that. Of course, it could be more robust, but at the price point, can't be too upset. So with all that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, it's full bodied. And again, I don't feel it's oversized. But definitely a full-sized watch. I think it looks quite good. Lays well, actually pretty well balanced, surprisingly. And I think a lot of that has to do with that wider lug, so you're going to be getting a little bit more meat when it comes to the way that this bracelet is going to lay and wear. Also, the additional articulation. I mean, these are fully articulated links, which does help it grip the wrist really well, even without having a heavy counterweight in terms of some type of complex sports clasp. Here you can see just traditional butterfly style deployment there, milled push button, and it all comes together quite nicely. Of course, if my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to see an additional amount of perspective distortion. It's just going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it actually is. Interesting how that works, right? So what I'll do is leave my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here, guys, so that you can still get a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. So you can see it's pretty nicely centered. And although I do have a wrist on the larger side of average at 7.5 inches, it's also quite a tall and round wrist, so it's not like super flat and wide and accommodating. So I'm definitely somebody that does have to be still quite conscious about ultimate lug to lug and of course proportionality when I'm evaluating a wristwatch. And I think, again, this wears full-sized, not oversized. And it's quite nice. And I think they do a good job of kind of compartmentalizing the thickness between the mid case, the bezel, and then, of course, the protruding case back in a way that gives you a bit of visual thinness. And honestly, at 13.4 millimeters, it's not the thinnest, but thanks to that wider width at 43 millimeters, it just feels quite proportional, which I can appreciate. So with that said, let's get this off the wrist, set up for some lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, not too shabby in terms of lume. Again, this isn't a dive watch. This isn't even a chronograph or a truly dedicated sports watch. It's more of an everyday piece that kind of straddles the line in terms of, what it's capable of, the complications and the balance of the total package. And, ultimately it's just a more of a full-size piece for those with larger wrists or who have preferences for larger watches. So the larger silhouette doesn't necessarily mean that this is tied directly to, robustness or sportiness. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition because now it's going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And as you guys can see here, quite a legible dial, really well balanced visually. Again, of course, you're going to draw comparisons to something like a chronograph, and maybe that was done on purpose here, guys, but at the same time it costs a lot less than a chronograph. Even the cheapest mechanic like a Seagull chronograph, this is still pretty well paced against that. And again, the nice thing is this is just something a little bit different. I do like the fact that they have that internally rotating 12-hour chaptering. I think that's just really neat and useful. I think that the way that they package the day and the date complication and all that, is that super useful? Not as much. Having a tachymeter bezel when really you don't have a start-stop, that you would have with a chronograph, for me, maybe not the most useful use, but the nice thing is it's good to have them, like, this doesn't get in the way of anything. Like, when you need to use any of those features, you can, they're there. And they're integrated in a way that feel non-obtrusive and non-obstructive, which I can appreciate. And again, of course, that's all dependent on if you like larger watches or not. So with that said, let's go ahead and get the lights back on here and get into some closing thoughts. Guys, on the wrist, definitely full-sized and substantial feeling, maybe a touch top-heavy, but the short links and additional articulation help keep the watch case planted on your wrist. For really secure wear, which I can appreciate. So if that's a concern, I think it actually balances pretty well thanks to that wider lug. And of course, the really nice, relatively short links that are fully articulated means it's going to really grip your wrist and you don't have to over tighten it for a more solid or secure fit. Now, in terms of model variants, guys, check the site links for current options and availability, including pricing. And don't forget to, of course, use that code AVG10 for 10% off. They just sent that over. I don't know if I get a commission or anything like that for that. I honestly don't pay attention to most of that, guys. I just do this because I enjoy it. And, if my audience finds me and people can get any type of help from that, then that's kind of all I need. And, I'll more put it on Google ads and YouTube to make sure that I'm compensated. So whenever, there's a code or something like that, if it helps me, cool, in the channel. But the more driving idea is that it'll help you guys save a little bit of money. Now, in terms of comparable models, I'm not huge into complications if you guys watch the channel. So do let me know in the description if there's anything you feel directly competes with a specific model, just because it's not typically something I really look into great depth. So it's hard for me to come up with any types of comparables. But let me know if you guys have any that are just screaming out to you that maybe even use the same movement. Who knows? Or yeah, I know there's a couple of Miyota movements that have some crazy complications in them that also can resemble a chronograph. So yeah, throw those out there if you're thinking of them as well. But for me, guys, if I get down to the bottom line, while this specific take on the everyday sports watch genre isn't really my cup of tea, I think from a design aesthetic standpoint and just overall theme, I can't deny that it's impressive, especially for an in-house offering available for only $200. Like, that's crazy to me. Like, this is a $200, in-house watch. And it has complications and it's doing more than it needs to do, even though the things that it's doing, I'm not specifically asking for when I'm out shopping for a watch. The fact is that, yeah, Seagull's out here executing at a higher level, and I'm impressed with that. And I'm definitely looking forward to checking out other future pieces from them and, continuing to build this channel and continue to have kind of, more off the wall stuff come in and it not just be your typical mainstream purchases, whether they be mainstream luxury or entry-level, mid-tier, or of course what's very popular right now, which is the ultra affordable kind of factory brand stuff. So always looking to diversify and really again help others who are looking for information about watches find some insight and information, and hopefully from the perspective of an average everyday bro. So just one who happens to have handled thousands of watches over the years. But, I'm far from a snob from that perspective, and I'm definitely far from just somebody who's spec hunting, looking for the cheapest thing. I definitely care a lot about quality. I care a lot about branding. I care about themes. I care about history. And those things all kind of weigh in terms of, where I derive value. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.